Valentine's Day. What a wonderful day Valentine's Day is. It's a holiday that excludes so many people because it's a holiday that's around a husband and wife or a boyfriend and girlfriend. And if you don't have one of those, or if you have a long distance relationship or whatever, you're kind of left out of that scenario, right? And you are. You're like, well, and I suppose you can say, well, mom loves me, dad loves me, and my brothers and sisters love me. But that's not what Valentine's is about. It's specifically around husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. So I don't know, if you like that holiday or not. One of the key figures in Valentine's is Cupid. You see Cupid all over the place and on the cards, and a little chubby little man with a baby or whatever he may be, and he's got a little bow and arrow, and he's going to shoot you and pierce you with this arrow, and that's supposed to cause love to bloom between the two people who are near each other when the arrow pierces them. The name Cupid comes from a Latin word that actually means passionate desire. So when you're looking back at Cupid, the Greek term is eros, or that's the Greek god they would use, eros. He's a god of desire, erotic love, and attraction. And certainly that is one form of love. And I suppose that is supposed to be the feeling that we have on Valentine's Day, that strong attraction to our mate, whether it be husband and wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be. And that image is intended to remind us of that love. When you see that image of Cupid, you're supposed to be reminded of that. And that arrow is going to come. But when you consider God's love, what image comes to mind?
The cross.
The cross. Thank you. The cross. And the scriptures bear that out, right? The scriptures bear out the cross as a symbol of God's love. Romans chapter 5 and verse 8, God demonstrates his own love toward us, and while we're yet sinners, Christ died for us. Right? So the cross is a symbol of God's love for us. John 15 and verse 13, greater love has no one than this, a person lay down his life for his friends. The cross. No greater love than one should lay down his life for his friends. And today people will even wear a cross as an emblem of that love. Right? They have the little cross around their neck or wherever it may be. I mean, certainly I think some people wear it for that. Some people wear it as just a costume jewelry or something that's in vogue or something, I suppose. But there are people who will wear that, and it's supposed to show us of their love for God and God's love for them. It's an emblem of that at least. But what if I told you that God demonstrates his love in ways that may seem unconventional to society today? When we think about love and that kind of love that God has for us, it doesn't always fall into what the world thinks love should be. And we see that when we're dealing with the issue of homosexuality, where people say, why can't you just love whoever you want? Well, you can love whoever you want. I mean, I love men. I just don't love men in that way. I love my brothers here, right? We have a love for each other, that Philadelphia love, that agape love. We just don't have that sexual love. And in the Greek language, there were different words that were used to clarify that. So the world may look at love in a different way, define it in different ways, but God has a specific way of defining these different kinds of love, and loves that are appropriate, right? There's an appropriate place for that eros type of love, husband and wife, to have that strong attraction for one another. There's an appropriate place for that. What if I told you that the love of God is not something that we experience just because we happen to have a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend? This is the kind of love that extends to everyone. We can all enjoy the blessings of God's love. But we may not always see it in the way that God intends. You see, sometimes in our world, when people see a demonstration of God's love, they don't see it as love. In fact, that's one of the arguments that you will find from people who will say that's why they don't believe in God. You see, it goes something like this. How can a loving God allow so much pain and suffering in this world? As if God, because he is love, and because he extends to us his love, is supposed to not allow anyone to go through difficulties of any degree. Because if we get to determine what degree of suffering is a demonstration of love and what degree of suffering is not a demonstration of love, like it's a demonstration of love if you let me stub my toe and I get better within a couple hours. But if I have to live in poverty, that's not a demonstration of love, right? We get to set the boundaries, but we don't. God's love is defined by the nature of God. And so when people will refuse to accept the love of God because it's not defined in the way that they would like it to be, then they're truly missing out on a wonderful blessing. Experiencing, enjoying, being part of a love that goes so much deeper than what we as humans could ever come up with. I'm just going to share with you two ways that God demonstrates his love toward us that many people would reject as a demonstration of love. But nevertheless it is. And the reason I want to share this with us is to encourage us to note when things like this come about, don't get to thinking, like some do, that God doesn't love you. I mean, some people have even used that or made that statement before. When they've had difficulties in their lives, they will turn away from God because God just doesn't love them. And people of the world will use that to draw you away from God. Well, if God is such a loving God, if he's a God that loves you, then why are you having to go through this? That's right. And why am I having to? I shouldn't have to go through this. Well, maybe we need a better understanding of how God demonstrates his love. The point is this: God's love is demonstrated in ways which others may see as a lack of love. No, I don't see love in that. So here's the first one. James chapter 1. Very common passage that's used in reference to our growth in God's love. James chapter 1 and verses 2 through 4. God demonstrates, or God's love is demonstrated when he allows me to go through suffering. That's unconventional because it's like, come on now. You see, what we want to do is the minute someone starts going through a difficult time, some parents, some people want to swoop in and rescue that individual from going through any difficult time. I love you and I want to protect you. I want to keep you from the harm of this world. I don't want you to go through this. It's too painful for you to go through this. So if you say that God demonstrates his love by allowing us to go through trials, through suffering, to some that's not love at all. But what does James say? Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. We can consider it all joy because of what trials produce. He says trials produce endurance. And if endurance is allowed to have its perfect result, we will be perfect, we will be complete, we will be lacking in nothing. Now, though James is speaking of joy in the times of trial, he also is telling us of the love of God. Look over in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13. Paul tells us that no matter what it is that we face, God does not abandon us to those trials without providing some hope or help. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13, Paul says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it. If God is going to provide the way of escape when we are being tempted, He's going to provide a way of escape when we're facing trials. He's going to provide the means for us to endure the trial, not to just give up on it. In fact, that's what James is telling us. He's not saying run from the trial. He's not saying God is going to swoop in and save you from the trial. He's saying ride out the trial so that it will produce something in you. Paul says that God will provide what you need to endure what it is you're going through. In Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13, Paul said that he could do what? All things through him, Christ, who strengthens him. His ability to endure the trials that he went through was because of the love of God. Because he knew God was going to provide a way for him to go through that trial. God will take my trials and he will use them to make me stronger. Let's go over to 1 Peter. In 1 Peter, we have an epistle addressing the persecution of Christians. And God does not just swoop in and annihilate the persecutors. He doesn't just come running in and saying, oh, you guys are affecting my children in a negative way. You're all gone. Well, I'm just going to wipe you out. Now you guys just go about your business. Go ahead. I took care of all them bad people. No. No, in fact, God allows them to continue to go through these. What kind of loving God is that? If he's a loving God, why is he allowing these people to be persecuted? Even to the point of death. What kind of loving father would allow his children to die? There's no love in that. Yet in fact, there is love in that. 1 Peter chapter 1, begin in verse 3. Peter says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away, reserved in heaven for us, or for you, who are protected by the power of God through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed at the last time. Let me stop there. He is not going to protect us necessarily from the suffering we're going to go through. He doesn't say that. He says we are protected by the power of God so that nothing bad ever happens to you. So that you have to go through any trial. No. The protection he offers us is to ensure that our faith does not waver even when we're going through trials, so that the outcome will be a salvation ready to be revealed. In this you greatly rejoice, verse 6. Even though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been distressed by various trials. Distressed by various trials. Come on, God. I'm being distressed by various trials. swoop in, save me, show me your love. But he says, if necessary, so that, why is it necessary? So that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not see him now, but believe in him, you greatly rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, obtaining as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your soul. You see, God does demonstrate his love for us even when we're going through difficult times. In fact, by the mere fact that he allows us to go through those difficult times is a demonstration of his love. Because what he's doing is providing for us the means to perfect our faith, providing the means for us to grow, to continue to be his righteousness, to continue to show our faith in him to the world around us. He doesn't just pull us out of the difficulties. Imagine yourself as someone who every time you faced a difficult situation, someone came in and fixed it for you. As an adult, you would be able to fix nothing. You would have to wait for someone to swoop in and fix it for you. You would be dependent upon other people to take care of you. And then you might just give up. It's like, well, what if I don't have anybody? No one's swooping in. Oh no, what am I doing now? It's getting really tough. I don't know what to do. Somebody save me. God says, I'm allowing you to go through these trials to produce something in you. Endurance. Because you're here for the long haul. And you need this endurance so that you can continue to serve me and as an outcome, find the salvation of your soul. In 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 10, he says, and after you have suffered for a little while, 1 Peter 5:10, and after you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace. You see, don't you love that? You see, just in case you get to thinking that God doesn't love you when you go through your suffering, Peter reminds us that he's the God of all grace. After you suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. He will do that. So God allows us to go through the trials that we go through so that we can grow, serve him, and be prepared for the day that we go home. Let me give you an illustration of this. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul was one, as we know, who faced all sorts of sufferings. In fact, he was told that was going to be the case in Acts chapter 9, what he must endure for the sake of Christ. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 1. No, if that's the one I wanted. Hang on just a second. Let me go back to it. Give me one, isn't it? Okay, it is. It's not the other one. All right. He says in verse 1, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 1, for we know that if the earthly tent in which is our house is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Now, so if your earthly tent is torn down, what's he talking about here? That's your body, right? Your physical body. For indeed, in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. Inasmuch as we, having put it on, will not be found naked. For indeed, while we are in this tent, we groan, being burdened, because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed, so that what is mortal will be swallowed up by life. Now, he who prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit, to us the Spirit as a pledge. Therefore, he says, being always of good courage, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight, we are of good courage. I say, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord. Therefore, we also have as our ambition, whether at home or absent, to be pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Therefore, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade men. But we are made manifest to God, and I hope that we are made manifest also in your consciousness. Paul says that in his life, that this body is just a temporary dwelling. And no matter what he goes through, if this body is put off, if he dies, whatever it is, that he has something greater for him, an eternal dwelling place for him. So he knows that whatever he goes through doesn't diminish what the outcome of his life is going to be. He sees the love of God in that. He knows that I'm going to be here, I'm going to be serving him in this mortal body, but I know that in my service, when my time comes, however it comes, whenever it may come, that there is glory that awaits me, and that glory is a demonstration of God's love for him. So Paul was one who was able to take comfort in the things that he went through. You go back and look at the list of things Paul will talk about that he suffered at the hand of the people around him, his Jewish brethren, the Gentiles. So many things were being done to Paul, yet he continued to serve God. And he did not look at those things as a reason to give up. He saw them as a demonstration of God's love. So although the world may look at us and say, well, or look at a situation of suffering, not see love in that, you allowing your kid to go through suffering. You see that a lot with parents, where the kid does something wrong and they call up mom and dad and they, you need to come and rescue me from this moment. You know, one of the hardest things to do is to tell your child no. It breaks your heart when you have to tell your child, you need to deal with this. Oh, I don't know. Oh. You need to deal with this. Because if you don't, then they're always going to be dependent upon you to come in and rescue them. And there's going to be a time that's going to come when you can't be there for them. And they're not going to be prepared for that. God prepares us for those moments so that we will be able to stand and resist when the temptation comes, when the trial comes. That is God demonstrating his love for us. Because he loves us, he prepares us for life here and into the future. Let me give you one other example here of God's love. This is the second point. His discipline. When people look at discipline, let's go to Hebrews. When people look at discipline, they don't always see discipline as a demonstration of love. At times, people see discipline as a demonstration of punishment. You're punishing them. We in our society today, we have corporal punishment. I remember the first time I heard that, we were getting involved in foster care. And we had to go to this meeting and get certified to do foster care. And we were told that you couldn't practice corporal punishment. And, me, I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but I assured them that I had no electric chair or gas chamber in my house, that I would not practice corporal punishment. And then I found out that corporal punishment was just physical punishment. I'm like, oh, is that what you meant by that? I thought it was something more severe, right? I found it interesting to hear some of these people talk about how they disciplined these foster kids in their home. One parent even bragged about the fact that they were sitting on their couch and this young teenage boy who was in foster care in their home came in, grabbed the remote control from them and turned it to what he wanted to watch. And so to show him, to demonstrate to him that that wasn't right, they all got up and they left the room and let him watch what he wanted to. I'm like, so you gave him his way. Okay. Giving a child their way is a demonstration of love. Have you seen some of the kids who get their own way? That's a demonstration of love. You have rebellious kids. What you're teaching a child when you allow them to do what they want to do and you just walk out is rebellion. It's okay for you to act that way and we won't do anything about it. But see, God doesn't do that. God is a God of love. And as a God of love, he will discipline us when we are wrong. He will correct us. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 4. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 4. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Furthermore, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share his holiness. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet, to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Some don't see discipline as a demonstration of love. But would I say that about disciplining my own child? It's easy to tell my children I love them. It's much more difficult for me to discipline them as a demonstration of that love. You know what? I love you. Do whatever you want. I love you. Stay out as long as you want. I love you. Go ahead and take the money out of my wallet and my purse, or whatever it may be. I love you. Go ahead and go to those drinking parties. Go ahead. I love you. I'm your friend. We're buds. We're pals. I'm the cool parent on the block. If that's the way you treat your child, you do not love your child in the way that God loves us. How can you? You're setting your children up for failure. You're setting them up for hurt, for harm. When you just allow them to do things and not discipline them and correct them in the right ways of doing things, what are we telling them? But God doesn't do that. He loves us and he disciplines us. He corrects us. He warns us. He tells us there's consequences for your actions. If you choose to be disobedient to his will, the outcome is not going to be pleasant. The complete opposite. It's going to be extremely, I don't even have an adjective to describe how unpleasant it's going to be. If we choose to rebel against God, then we will find ourselves eternally condemned. But because God loves us, he says, let me discipline you. Let me train you. Let me show you what righteousness is and help you along so that you can share in my holiness and my righteousness. Because I love you, I will discipline you. That's a demonstration of God's love. He disciplines me to train me so that I might have that peaceful fruit of righteousness. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 11. The other day I was telling Jacob here earlier, on this new route I have these new teenagers sitting in the back. They're getting a little rowdy. They got to test the new guy, right? New driver comes in. You find this every time a sub driver gets on the bus. You think you've got the most perfect kids, and you come back and the sub driver is like, your kids are horrible, terrible. And you're like, well, they're always good with me. Yeah, because you're the new guy, and they're just going to test you and see, we can get away with anything. They won't sit where they're supposed to, right? That's the way they act. I always told my kids, please represent me in a proper way. You know. Well, these kids here in the back, they're not real bad, but they're doing some things, laying across the seat. One kid threw something out the window. So I was hollering back at them. They're not wearing their mask, and now we have this new sticker on our bus that has a TSA code on it, warning you by the TSA. And I told them they're all going to haul you to prison if you don't wear your mask. There's a TSA sign up there, and it says, you know, you're required to wear your mask. And I told the kids, you got to wear your mask on the bus. I got kids, high schoolers, they're sitting in the back, no mask. So I holler back at them. And one teenage boy goes, I just can't tolerate that. When you say something and he's like, yeah. So I just found a nice spot to pull my bus over on Desert Hills Road, not too far from John's house. Pull my bus over, turn it off, I get up, climb out of my seat, put the key in my pocket, and I just go walk into the back. And I got, you know, it was my cowboy hat. I got my old rough jacket on, and I'm not a small guy, so and I make sure those 13 boots are stomping down the aisle. I want them to hear the rumble. And all the other kids are just like, what's going on? And I get to the back of the bus, and there's 4 seats and then an empty one. I sit down and said, hello, gentlemen. I think it's time we had a little talk. And I began to explain to them that there are certain battles in life that you need to pick. And Jacob and I were talking about this. This is our line we use. You will not win this battle. It's not a battle you can win. Because I got a blue piece of paper and I'll write you up and pretty soon. And let me tell you what, I'm out of New River. You do not want to be walking to school or having your parents take you to school in New River. They go to Boulder Creek. You got to go around. I get to go through a back gate. They don't get to do that. Now, why did I do that? It's called discipline. It's called discipline. Now, certainly you say, yeah, well, and honestly, there's some selfishness in it because I'm like, look, I don't want to be stressed out. I'm trying to drive. I'm trying to watch the road. But I try to take opportunity where I can to teach people to respect one another. And that's a great place to do it. And so I took an opportunity to show them and teach them that there are things in life that are worth fighting for and there are things in life that are not. And this is not one of the things that you want to fight over. That's called discipline. Because I care for them. And I hope the best for them. And if I can plant one little seed, some parents, why can't kids just be kids? That is a common response from parents. When you call them about their child, they say, well, why can't kids just be kids? You know what, ma'am, sir, you're right. I'm going to allow 36 kids on my bus just to be kids. Or is it just your kid that gets to be a kid? Because if I let 36 kids be like your kid, you know what that's going to look like? So, that's the way some people look at discipline. Oh, if you love them, just let them do what they want. You know, just let them be kids. The problem with being a kid is you do a whole lot of stupid things. You do a whole lot of bad things. You do a whole lot of harmful things. It's up to us as adults to step in to help them, to navigate through these things. And that's what God does for us in His love. He helps us navigate through this life so that we can be eternally with Him. And so He disciplines us. He disciplines us with love. So when you get to thinking that God, those out there who want to argue that God is not a God of love, how can God be a God of love if He lets you go through difficult times and bad things are happening? First off, God's not the one bringing the bad things into the world. He's not the one out there doing it. We humans are making the choice. And being a God of love, He lets us make our choice. But while He's letting us make our choice, He tells us how to make the right choice. He loves us enough to tell us what to do so we can make a godly choice, a righteous choice. Because if he didn't love us, he would just stay silent and leave us to our own vices and our own condemnation. So although we celebrate this Valentine's Day, and it's for a select few out there who have someone in their life that they love in that kind of way, the Cupid way, God extends to us a love that's for everyone, if you'll accept it. It's a love that allows us to go through difficult times. It's a love that disciplines us when we get off track. Nevertheless, it is still God's love. And it's the love that we need.